Hey everyone, and welcome to a deep dive, into this really fascinating world of rhetoric.
Yeah.
Aya Richard's Philosophy of Rhetoric.
Yeah.
It sounds like you are looking into, you know, getting a better grasp on how words work,
Right.
how they get their power,
Yeah.
the impact of context and all that.
Absolutely.
And we've got some really intriguing excerpts from Richard's work.
Yeah.
I think that will help with that.
For sure. Richards was ahead of his time, you
Yeah.
know? His ideas about rhetoric are still so relevant today.
Okay, so let's unpack this idea of interinanimation of words.
Yeah.
Richards compares words to a hand movement, saying that when you move your hand, you're actually engaging a whole system of muscles and bones.
Right.
What's fascinating to me is that he's suggesting words don't have these fixed meanings.
Right.
We often attribute to them.
It's a brilliant analogy. You know, it really highlights how words gain their meaning from their relationship with all the other words in the system of language, rather than existing in isolation.
Okay.
So he's challenging this common assumption we have that words are like static labels attached to things.
So instead of thinking cat always means cat,
Right.
we need to consider the whole web of language and context surrounding it.
Absolutely.
It's kind of mind-blowing when you think about it.
Yeah, it really is.
Yeah.
And what's really fascinating here is that Richards even suggests that this fluidity is actually a good thing. So he differentiates between what he calls rigid and fluid uses of language.
Okay.
So rigid language strives for precision and clarity.
Okay.
Like in scientific writing where every symbol has a very specific meaning.
Right.
But in everyday fluid language, meanings are more adaptable and heavily reliant on context.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
But wouldn't you say there needs to be some balance? I mean, if meanings are always shifting, how could we ever be sure we're understanding each other?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
And it's one that Richard himself grapples with.
Okay.
He acknowledges the potential for ambiguity,
Right.
but emphasizes that effective communication hinges on understanding both the speaker's intent and the context in which the words are uttered.
Okay.
Think about it. You know, even in rigid language, misinterpretations can occur if the context isn't clear.
So context is king.
Exactly.
Even when we think we're being super precise, that's a good reminder for those of us who like to think we're always being perfectly clear.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And this leads us to Richard's point about good writing and usage.
Okay.
He argued that we should judge writing by its effectiveness, not just by whether it follows rigid rules.
Wait, so you're saying that bending the rules can actually be good for language? That goes against everything I learned in school.
Well, think about it this way.
Okay.
Have you ever read something that was grammatically perfect, but utterly boring?
Okay.
Or maybe something that broke a few rules?
Yep.
But was incredibly impactful.
Sure.
Richards argues that the beauty and effectiveness of language often lie in its flexibility. He suggests that we shouldn't impose strict, rigid standards on all language.
Right.
Because sometimes bending the rules can lead to more powerful and memorable communication.
So it's not about following the rules to the letter.
Right.
But about using language in a way that truly achieves its purpose.
Exactly.
I like that. It makes good writing seem less intimidating.
Right.
And more about understanding the nuances of language.
Precisely.
Yeah.
It's about being intentional and making choices that serve your purpose.
Okay.
And this ties back to the interinanimation of words.
Right.
A word's power comes from this entire system of language.
Okay.
And how it's been used over time. It's like each word carries a history.
Yeah.
A collection of all its past uses and meanings.
Right.
That informs its current meaning.
I'm starting to see language in a whole new light.
Yeah.
It's not just about dictionaries and grammar rules.
Right.
It's about this incredible network of interconnected meanings and uses.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And this brings us to another interesting point that Richards makes.
Okay.
The myth of the common meaning. We often assume that words like beautiful, art, or good have a single essential meaning that underlies all their various uses.
Yeah.
But Richards challenges this.
You mean there's not one definition
Yeah.
that captures the true essence of a word like beauty?
Right.
That seems counterintuitive, doesn't it?
It does.
We all have a general sense of what beauty means.
We do, but Richards argues that it's not about finding that one perfect universal definition.
Right.
Instead, he says that a word's force comes from the combination of its many potential meanings and uses.
So instead of settling for the single perfect definition of beauty, we should embrace all the various nuances and interpretations that contribute to its overall meaning.
Yep.
I see how that ties back to the interconnectedness of language we were talking about earlier.
Exactly. It's about appreciating the complexity of a word like beauty and understanding how its meaning shifts depending on the context, the speaker, and the historical moment.
This is making me rethink everything I thought I knew about how language works.
Yeah.
It's so much more complex and dynamic than I ever realized.
It is. And get this idea actually connects to how rhetoricians have helped refine our understanding of brainstorming.
Okay.
We often hear about brainstorming as this free-flowing process of generating ideas.
Right.
But there's actually a lot more to it than that.
Yeah, it's all about getting those creative juices flowing, right?
Right. But how do multiple meanings fit into brainstorming?
Yeah, how does that?
Well, when we brainstorm, we're essentially throwing out a bunch of words and phrases, hoping to make new connections. Each of those words comes with a whole network of potential meanings.
Okay.
Understanding this web of meanings can actually make brainstorming sessions even more effective.
Okay.
It's not just about random words, it's about the tapestry of meanings those words bring into play.
Wow, I never thought about it that way.
Yeah.
So brainstorming isn't just about coming up with crazy ideas.
Right.
It's about understanding the potential meanings of the words we use.
Exactly.
And how those meanings can spark new insights.
Yes.
That's a game changer.
It is.
Yeah.
And Richard's work gives us the tools to delve even deeper into this world of meaning and persuasion. He provides us with a powerful framework called the Rhetorical Situation to analyze how language works in different contexts.
Okay. I've heard that term before.
Yeah.
But I'm not entirely sure what it means.
Okay.
Can you break it down for us?
Absolutely. It's a way to understand communication by considering 5 key elements: audience, purpose, context, message, and exigence.
Okay, let's take those one by one.
Yeah.
What exactly do each of those elements mean?
So audience refers to who is being addressed.
Okay.
Who is the intended recipient of the message.
Right.
Purpose is all about the why behind the communication.
Okay.
What is the speaker or writer hoping to achieve?
Okay, I think I'm following so far.
Yeah.
What about context? I have a feeling this one is important.
You're absolutely right. Context is crucial.
Okay.
It encompasses all the circumstances surrounding the communication. This includes things like the historical moment, the cultural background, and even the physical setting.
Right. The same words can have completely different meanings depending on the context.
Exactly.
Like saying cool to your friend has a different meaning than saying cool when describing the weather, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then we have message, which is simply the content of the communication.
Okay.
What is being said or written.
Okay, that one's pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
What about exigence? That one sounds a bit more complex.
It is a bit more nuanced.
Okay.
Exigence refers to the specific event or circumstance that triggers the need for communication. It's what creates the urgency or the need to speak or write.
So if purpose is the why behind the communication,
yeah,
exigence is the spark that sends the whole thing in motion.
Exactly.
Like the problem that needs to be addressed or the question that needs to be answered.
Exactly. Right. And what's so powerful about the rhetorical situation is that it's a flexible framework. It helps us understand communication in all its forms, not just written texts.
You mean it can be applied to analyze things like speeches, advertisements, even everyday conversations?
Absolutely. It gives us a way to think critically about how language is used to achieve specific goals in any given situation.
And to show you just how practical this framework can be, let's take a quick look at a real-world example.
Okay.
I'm all ears.
How about we analyze that new smartphone ad that's been everywhere?
Yeah.
You know, the one with the catchy jingle and those incredible visuals of people using the phone in all sorts of exciting locations and situations.
Oh, yeah, I know the one.
Yeah.
It makes you feel like you can do anything with that phone.
Right.
I actually kind of want one now that you mention it.
That's the power of effective rhetoric.
Yeah.
Now, let's think about this ad in terms of the rhetorical situation.
Okay.
Who is the target audience? What is the purpose of the ad? What's the context in which we're seeing it?
Well, the audience is probably young, tech-savvy people who are looking for the latest and greatest gadget. They're probably active on social media and care about having a phone that looks good and can keep up with their lifestyle.
Exactly. And what about the purpose? What is the ad trying to achieve?
Well, obviously they want to sell phones.
Right.
But it also seems like they're trying to create a certain image.
Yeah.
A feeling of excitement and possibility associated with their brand. Like if you have this phone, you'll be part of this cool, adventurous group of people.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And the context is also crucial.
Right.
We're seeing this ad in a world where technology is constantly evolving.
Yeah.
And people are always looking for the next big thing.
Right. The ad is playing into that desire for the newest and coolest tech.
Exactly.
It's making me think I need to upgrade my old phone.
Right.
Even though it works perfectly fine.
That's the power of persuasive rhetoric.
Yeah.
And think about the message itself. Those images of people using the phone in dynamic, exciting ways.
Yeah.
It's not just about the features of the phone. Yeah. It's about the lifestyle it represents.
Right. They're not just selling a phone. They're selling an experience, a feeling of being connected and in the know.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the exigence, well, there's always a demand for new and improved technology.
Right.
And this ad is capitalizing on that demand, making you feel like you're missing out if you don't have the latest model.
Wow. I never realized how much thought and strategy goes into something as seemingly simple as a smartphone ad.
It is interesting, isn't it?
It's actually kind of sneaky when you think about it.
It is.
Yeah.
And the rhetorical situation gives us the tools to break it down and understand how it works.
This is seriously eyes-opening.
Yeah.
I'm starting to see rhetorical analysis everywhere I look.
And that's the beauty of it. It gives you a new lens through which to view the world. You start to see how language is being used to influence you in all sorts of subtle ways.
I can't wait to see what other insights we uncover as we continue our deep dive into rhetoric.
There's so much more to explore.
Yeah.
Richard's work has so much to offer in terms of understanding the power and complexity of language.
This is already shaping up to be one of my favorite deep dives yet. It's making me want to pay closer attention to how I use language.
Right.
Both in my writing and my everyday conversation.
That's a great takeaway.
Yeah.
Richards would be pleased to hear that his work is inspiring you to become a more mindful communicator.
Before we move on, is there anything else you'd like to highlight about this idea of the rhetorical situation?
Absolutely.
I feel like there's so much to unpack here.
One thing that's really important to remember is that all 5 elements of the rhetorical situation are interconnected.
Can you give me an example of how that plays out in real life?
Well, let's imagine you're writing an email to your boss asking for a raise.
Okay.
Your audience is obviously your boss.
Right.
Your purpose is to persuade them to give you more money. But the context might influence how you approach the message.
Okay.
For instance, if the company is doing really well financially, you might be more confident in your request. But if the company is struggling, you might need to be more careful in how you frame your argument.
So the context can really impact how you craft your message.
Exactly.
And what you choose to emphasize.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the exigence might be that you've taken on more responsibilities or that your cost of living has gone up.
Right.
Making a raise necessary, understanding all these elements helps you craft a more effective and persuasive message.
Wow, I never thought about email writing in those terms before.
Yeah.
It's like the rhetorical situation gives you a blueprint for crafting any kind of communication.
That's exactly it.
Yeah.
From a simple text message to a formal presentation.
This is amazing.
Yeah.
I'm already starting to see how these ideas can help me communicate more effectively in all areas of my life.
And that's just the beginning.
Okay.
Richards has even more to offer us, particularly when it comes to understanding how to analyze communication effectively.
I'm ready for more.
Okay.
What else can you tell us about this fascinating world of rhetoric?
Well, one of the things that Richards emphasized was the importance of considering the emotional impact of language, not just its literary meaning.
Okay.
He called this the emotive function of language.
So it's not just about the literal meaning of a word, but also about the feelings and associations it evokes in the listener.
Precisely. Okay. Richards called this the emotive function of language. And he argued that understanding this emotive power is crucial for effective communication, especially in persuasive contexts.
Can you give me an example of how that might work in a real-life situation?
Imagine you're trying to persuade someone to donate to a charity.
Okay.
That helps homeless animals.
Okay.
You could simply present the facts.
Right.
The number of animals in shelters, the cost of caring for them, and the impact of donations. But you could also use language that evokes empathy and compassion.
So instead of just stating that many animals are euthanized each year,
right,
you might talk about a specific animal's story, highlighting their loneliness and fear.
By appealing to the listener's emotions, you're more likely to motivate them to take action.
Okay.
This is something that advertisers and politicians understand very well.
Right.
They use emotionally charged language to sway opinions and influence behavior.
It's kind of scary when you think about it.
It is.
It makes me realize how easily we could be manipulated by language.
Right.
Especially if we're not aware of the strategies being used.
That's why Richard's work is so important.
Yeah.
He gives us the tools to analyze language critically, and to understand how it's being used to influence us by understanding the emotive function of language.
Right.
We can be more discerning consumers of information and less susceptible to manipulation.
This is making me rethink everything I thought I knew about communication.
Yeah.
It's not just about conveying information.
Right.
It's about understanding the emotional impact of language.
Exactly.
And using it ethically and effectively.
And this brings us to another fascinating aspect of Richard's work.
Okay.
His challenge to the notion that words like beautiful art or good have a single essential meaning.
He argued that there's no one definition that captures the true essence of those kinds of words, right?
Exactly.
It's all about the combination of their many potential meanings and uses.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And this idea has some interesting implications for how we understand concepts.
Okay.
Like brainstorming. Remember how we talked about how words carry multiple meanings?
Yes.
And how that can make brainstorming sessions more effective?
It's about recognizing the web of potential meanings associated with each word.
Exactly.
And using those connections to spark new ideas.
Now, let's apply that to a real-world example.
Okay.
Imagine a team of marketers brainstorming ideas for a new advertising campaign.
Right.
They might start by throwing out words like innovative, exciting, and engaging.
Okay, I see where you're going with this.
Yeah.
Each of those words has multiple layers of meaning, depending on the context.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Innovative could refer to a new technology, a groundbreaking approach, or even a fresh perspective. Exciting could evoke feelings of anticipation, adventure, or even a bit of danger.
Okay.
And engaging could imply interaction, involvement, or even a sense of community.
So by understanding the multiple meanings of these words, the marketers can start to generate a wider range of ideas and explore different directions for their campaign.
Exactly. Yeah. It's not just about coming up with random words. It's about recognizing the richness of meaning behind those words.
Right.
And using that complexity to fuel the creative process.
Wow, that's a really powerful way to think about brainstorming.
It is.
It's not just about coming up with crazy ideas.
Right.
It's about using language in a thoughtful and strategic way to generate truly innovative solutions.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And Richard's work gives us the framework to do just that.
Okay.
He encourages us to move beyond the simplistic notion of common meaning and embrace the complexity and dynamism of language.
I'm starting to see how this deeper understanding of language can have a real impact on everything from our creative processes to our ability to analyze and evaluate information.
Yeah.
It's like a whole new world of possibilities has opened up.
And that's what's so exciting about exploring the world of rhetoric.
Yeah.
It's a journey of discovery that can transform the way we think, communicate, and interact with the world around us.
I'm hooked.
Good.
What else can you tell us about Richard's insights into the power of language?
Well, one of the things that Richards emphasized was the importance of considering the emotional impact of language, not just its literal meaning.
Okay.
He called this the emotive function of language.
So we've talked about the rhetorical situation, and I'm really starting to see how it applies to everything from advertising to everyday conversations. But I'm curious, what happens when we apply this framework to something like a political speech? How does the rhetorical situation help us understand the strategies a politician might use?
That's a great question, and it's a perfect example of how the rhetorical situation can be used to analyze persuasive communication.
Okay.
Let's say a politician is giving a speech about healthcare reform. Their audience might be voters in their district or even the entire nation.
Okay.
Their purpose is likely to persuade the audience to support their proposed policy changes.
So they're not just trying to inform people about healthcare.
Right.
They're actively trying to get them on board with their specific plan.
Exactly. And the context is incredibly important here.
Right.
Think about the current political climate, the state of the healthcare system, and the public's concerns about healthcare costs and access.
Right.
All these factors will shape the politician's message and how they choose to frame their argument.
So a politician might adjust their talking points and even their tone, depending on whether they're speaking to a group of doctors or a group of concerned citizens.
Absolutely.
Okay.
The audience and context play a huge role in shaping the message.
Right.
And the exigence might be a recent healthcare crisis or a growing sense of dissatisfaction with the current system.
Yeah.
The politician is using that sense of urgency to make their case for reform.
This framework is making me realize that there's so much more to political speeches than just the words themselves.
Right.
It's all about understanding the strategy behind the message.
Yes.
And how it's tailored to a specific audience and situation.
Precisely.
Okay.
And Richards would argue that understanding these rhetorical strategies is essential for critical thinking and informed decision-making.
Right.
We can't just take words at face value.
Okay.
We need to analyze the context,
Yeah.
the purpose, and the intended audience to truly understand the message.
That's a powerful point.
It is.
It makes me want to go back and listen to some political speeches.
Right.
With this new framework in mind.
Yeah.
I bet I'll hear things I never noticed before.
I think you'll be surprised by how much you pick up on. And this brings us back to Richard's ideas about the flexibility of language.
Okay.
He was a big advocate for bending the rules of grammar and usage to achieve specific effects. He argued that we shouldn't be afraid to experiment with language.
Right.
To find new and creative ways to express ourselves.
But didn't he also caution against sacrificing clarity?
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, there's a difference between bending the rules and just being confusing, right?
Absolutely. Richards believed in using language effectively and purposefully. He wasn't suggesting we throw grammar out the window altogether, but he did believe that sometimes breaking the rules can lead to more impactful and memorable communication.
Can you give me an example of how that might work?
Think about poetry. Poets often break grammatical rules or use unconventional language to create a specific mood or rhythm.
Right.
They might use metaphors, similes, or other figurative language to evoke certain emotions or images in the reader's mind.
That's a great example. I love how poetry can use language in such a unique and evocative way. It's like a different language altogether sometimes.
Exactly. And Richards would argue that even in everyday communication, we can benefit from experimenting with language and finding new ways to express ourselves.
Okay.
He encouraged us to be playful with words.
Right.
To use them in surprising and delightful ways.
That's a refreshing perspective. It makes writing and speaking seem less like a chore and more like an art form.
That's exactly how Richards saw it.
Yeah.
And he believed that this playful approach to language could actually lead to greater understanding and connection between people.
I like that idea a lot.
Yeah.
It makes communication seem less about following rules.
Right.
And more about finding creative ways to connect with others.
Exactly. And speaking of connection, Richards had some fascinating insights into how words can evoke emotional responses.
Okay.
He argued that words don't just convey information, they also carry emotional weight.
So it's not just about the literal meaning of a word, but also about the feelings and associations it evokes in the listener.
Precisely.
Okay.
Richards called this the emotive function of language. And he argued that understanding this emotive power is crucial for effective communication.
Right.
Especially in persuasive contexts.
Can you give me an example of how that might work in a real-life situation?
Imagine you're trying to persuade someone to donate to a charity that helps homeless animals.
Okay.
You could simply present the facts, the number of animals in shelters, the cost of caring for them, and the impact of donations. But you could also use language that evokes empathy and compassion.
So instead of just stating that many animals are euthanized each year, you might talk about a specific animal's story.
Exactly.
Highlighted their loneliness and fear.
By appealing to the listener's emotions, you're more likely to motivate them to take action.
Okay.
This is something that advertisers and politicians understand very well.
Right.
They use emotionally charged language to sway opinions and influence behavior.
It's kind of scary when you think about it.
It is.
It makes me realize how easily we can be manipulated by language.
Right.
Especially if we're not aware of the strategies being used.
That's why Richard's work is so important.
Yeah.
It gives us the tools to analyze language critically and to understand how it's being used to influence us.
Okay.
By understanding the emotive function of language.
Right.
We can be more discerning consumers of information and less susceptible to manipulation.
This is making me rethink everything I thought I knew about communication.
Yeah.
It's not just about conveying information.
Right.
It's about understanding the emotional impact of language.
Exactly.
And using it ethically and effectively.
And this brings us to another fascinating aspect of Richard's work.
Okay.
His challenge to the notion that words like beautiful art or good have a single essential meaning.
Oh, yeah. He argued that there's no one definition that captures the true essence of those kinds of words, right?
Precisely.
It's all about the combination of their many potential meanings and uses.
And this idea has some interesting implications for how we understand concepts like brainstorming. Remember how we talked about how words carry multiple meanings?
Yes.
And how that can make brainstorming sessions more effective?
It's about recognizing the web of potential meanings associated with each word.
Exactly.
Using those connections to spark new ideas.
Now let's apply that to a real-world example.
Okay.
Imagine a team of marketers brainstorming ideas for a new advertising campaign.
Right.
They might start by throwing out words like innovative, exciting, and engaging.
Okay, I see where you're going with this. Each of those words has multiple layers of meaning depending on the context.
Exactly.
Yep.
Innovative could refer to a new technology, a groundbreaking approach, or even a fresh perspective. Exciting could evoke feelings of anticipation, adventure, or even a bit of danger.
Yeah.
And engaging could imply interaction involvement or even a sense of community.
So by understanding the multiple meanings of these words,
yes,
the marketers can start to generate a wider range of ideas and explore different directions for their campaign.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's not just about coming up with random words. It's about recognizing the richness of meaning behind those words and using that complexity to fuel the creative process.
Wow, that's a really powerful way to think about brainstorming.
It is.
It's not just about coming up with crazy ideas. It's about using language in a thoughtful and strategic way to generate truly innovative solutions.
Precisely. And Richard's work gives us the framework to do just that. He encourages us to move beyond the simplistic notion of common meaning and embrace the complexity and dynamism of language.
I'm starting to see how this deeper understanding of language can have a real impact on everything from our creative processes to our ability to analyze and evaluate information. It's like a whole new world of possibilities has opened up.
And that's what's so exciting about exploring the world of rhetoric.
Yeah.
It's a journey of discovery that can transform the way we think, communicate, and interact with the world around us.
I'm hooked.
Good.
What else can you tell us about Richard's insights into the power of language?
Well, one of the things that Richards emphasized was the importance of considering the emotional impact of language, not just its literal meaning. He called this the emotive function of language.
So we've been talking about how words carry emotional weight, and can be used to evoke specific feelings in the listener. You mentioned that Richards called this the emotive function of language, right?
That's right. Richards recognized that words don't just convey information neutrally. They can also stir up feelings, shape attitudes, and even motivate people to action.
Right.
This emotive function is especially potent in persuasive communication.
Can you give me an example of how that might work in a real-world scenario?
Imagine you're trying to raise awareness about climate change.
Okay.
You could present a bunch of statistics and scientific data, which is important.
Right.
But to really get people to care and inspire them to take action, you might use language that evokes a sense of urgency, responsibility, or even fear.
So instead of just saying the ice caps are melting,
right,
you might talk about the devastating impact this will have on coastal communities, painting a vivid picture of homes being lost to rising sea levels.
Exactly. By tapping into people's emotions, you're more likely to create a lasting impact and motivate them to make changes in their own lives.
This is making me realize how important it is to be aware of the emotional impact of the language we use, both when we're speaking and when we're listening to others. Yeah. It's like a whole new layer of meaning that we need to pay attention to.
It is, and it's something that skilled communicators, whether they're writers, speakers, or advertisers, understand very well.
Yeah.
They use this emotive power of language to connect with their audience on a deeper level,
right,
and influence their thoughts and actions.
This makes me think about all those times I've been swept away by a powerful speech or moved by a beautiful piece of writing. I never really stopped to think about the specific words and phrases that were creating those emotional responses in me.
That's the power of language, and Richard's work helps us unpack those techniques and understand how they work.
Right.
He was fascinated by the way words can evoke such a wide range of feelings and responses in us.
It makes you realize that language isn't just a tool for conveying information. It's a powerful force that can shape our thoughts, beliefs, and actions.
Exactly, and that's why Richards believed it was so important to study rhetoric and understand how language works.
Okay.
He saw as essential for critical thinking, effective communication, and ethical persuasion.
This deep dive has really opened my eyes to the complexity and power of language.
Yeah.
It's like I've been speaking and writing my whole life without really understanding the tools I was using.
And that's the beauty of exploring rhetoric.
Yeah.
It gives you a whole new framework for understanding and appreciating how language shapes our world.
So if we step back and look at everything we've discussed today, what would you say are some of the key takeaways from Richard's work?
Well, first and foremost, Richards challenged the notion that words have fixed inherent meanings. He showed us that meaning is fluid and dynamic, shaped by context relationships between words and even the emotions they evoke.
Right, it's like that interanimation of words idea.
Yes.
Words are constantly influencing and shaping each other, creating this incredible web of interconnected meanings. It's not about finding the one true meaning of a word, but about understanding how its meaning shifts and evolves depending on how it's used.
Exactly, and this leads to another key takeaway.
Okay.
We can't judge the effectiveness of language solely on whether it follows rigid rules. Sometimes bending the rules, being creative with language, can lead to more impactful and memorable communication.
Right.
Think of those poets we were discussing.
That's a good reminder for those of us who get stuck in the grammar rule rut. It's about understanding that language is a tool, and we can use it in different ways to achieve different effects.
Precisely. And finally, I think Richards would want us to remember that language is never neutral. It always carries an emotional charge, and understanding this emotive function is crucial for both creating and analyzing persuasive communication.
It makes you realize that there's so much more going on beneath the surface of language than we often realize. It's like there's this whole hidden world of meaning and persuasion that we can now start to explore.
That's a great way to put it, and Richards has given us the tools to navigate this complex and fascinating world.
This has been an incredible deep dive. I feel like I've learned so much about language communication and even myself as a communicator.
I'm thrilled to hear that. And remember, this is just the beginning of your journey into the world of rhetoric.
Right.
Richards' work is a fantastic starting point, but there's so much more to explore.
I'm definitely feeling inspired to continue learning.
Good.
Before we wrap up, do you have any final thoughts or questions you'd like to leave our listener with?
Yes, actually, we've talked a lot about how context shapes the meaning of words. But I think it's worth pondering this. If meaning is so fluid and context dependent, how do we ever achieve true understanding with each other? How do we know we're really on the same page?
Wow, that's a deep question.
It is.
It really makes you think about the challenges and complexities of communication. I guess it's a reminder to be mindful of our own biases and assumptions, to listen carefully to others, and to always be open to the possibility that we might not be fully grasping what someone else is trying to convey.
That's a great insight. Communication is an ongoing process of negotiation and interpretation. It's not always easy, but it's certainly worth the effort.
This deep dive has given me so much to think about. I'm already looking at language in a whole new light.
That's fantastic to hear, and I hope it inspires you to keep exploring this fascinating world of words and meaning.
I definitely will. Thanks for such an insightful and engaging conversation.
It's been my pleasure. Happy exploring.
And to our listener, thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We hope you'll join us again soon for another fascinating exploration of the world of knowledge.